Lucas, and I'm the Member of Parliament in Brighton, and I represent the Green Party. And it is my huge honour and privilege to welcome you all to the House of Commons tonight. You are so very, very welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I will be chairing at least the first half of the meeting. You probably know these are quite busy times right now in the House of Commons. I think we still have a government, but one never quite knows. But I am really happy to welcome our speakers. But first I wanted just to say a few words of introduction for tonight's meeting. Because you will know that it's almost exactly 8 years ago, March the 11th, 2011, when the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster was triggered in the Fukushima prefecture, about 150 miles north of Tokyo. And over the ensuing weeks, there were 4 explosions, 3 nuclear meltdowns, and over 160,000 people evacuated, with radioactive emissions scattered over large tracts of Japan. And a year later, in 2012, an investigative panel of the Japanese National Parliament concluded that the Fukushima disaster was, and I quote, profoundly man-made and was caused by a disregard of the risks of earthquakes by an industry determined to preserve the illusion that nuclear power was absolutely safe. The panel attributed the accident to the collusion of government, regulator, and the industry in gambling the public's well-being on lowering the high cost of safety from what is an inherently dangerous technology. And as you will know, the disaster continues to this day, and it's still causing immense problems. And some of those problems include many tons of melted nuclear fuel still being unstable under reactors numbers 1, 2, and 3. An estimated 300 tons of contaminated water are dumped every single day into the Pacific Ocean. Now, that water is needed to keep cool the melted nuclear fuel, which must not be allowed to melt again. Many millions of cubic meters of contaminated soil remain in huge temporary dumps with no clear idea of where they will be stored in the long term. And according to NHK World Japan, over 50,000 evacuees remain in temporary accommodation. And despite government pressure to return to so-called cleaned-up towns, most evacuees, quite understandably, are very reluctant to do so. So the toll of Fukushima is enormous. Over 7% of the land area of Japan was contaminated to a serious level. Official reports say that over 3,600 people have died as a result of the nuclear disaster, including over 2,000 during the evacuations necessary to avoid the large radiation exposures. Over 180 additional cases of thyroid cancer have been recorded in children and teenagers so far. This is far more than was expected. From official WHO collective dose estimates, over 5,000 other cancers are likely to occur. Reports are now trickling out of other health effects, including recent rises in congenital heart disease in infants. But these are just the reported health studies. Who is counting the just as serious number of suicides or the mental health effects or so-called nuclear divorces or families who remain geographically separated? Now, we shall hear very soon first-hand testimonies of these effects. But the restoration, the clean-up, the compensation, the recovery costs are immense. The Japan Centre for Economic Research calculates that these will range from 240 to 560 billion pounds. That is almost 4 times higher than Japanese government estimates. But of course, we shall probably never know all of the true costs of Fukushima. But what we do know is that we must never forget this catastrophe. And that is why we are meeting here tonight. We must continue to counter the efforts of the Japanese government, of TEPCO, of the academics and the official bodies, all of whom are seeking to minimize its effects and to try to ignore the past. This, unbelievably, includes holding some events of the 2020 Olympic Games in contaminated parts of Tokyo and Fukushima Prefecture. And I should mention that the legal fight for compensation is a major issue still, obviously, in Japan. And many court cases are being fought by Fukushima evacuees, parents, and many others. And some of these court cases right now are reaching a very important stage. Two major class actions are the Children's Rights Trial, which demands that local government recognise the rights of primary and secondary school students of Fukushima Prefecture to enjoy education in a healthy environment. And second, the Parent and Child Trial, which seeks compensation from the Fukushima Prefecture and from the Japanese central governments as well. Now, this meeting obviously is about what is going on in Japan, but I want quickly to mention the UK situation, as it has some Japanese parallels. Because here in the UK, there are two Japanese multinationals, Toshiba and Hitachi, and they recently indicated that they no longer wish to proceed with their proposed nuclear reactors in Cumbria, in the north of England, and in Wales. And a third, Mitsubishi, withdrew from its proposed reactors in Turkey just 6 months ago. Now, they are all withdrawing from their nuclear businesses, even as the Japanese government and TEPCO are still pushing for the reopening of old reactors that were closed after the accident. So why are these Japanese nuclear conglomerates pulling out of nuclear? And a major factor has been the increased costs of safety features in new reactors that are now required after Fukushima. So I should like now to introduce our speakers tonight. We warmly welcome to Britain 3 Japanese mothers from Fukushima: Akiko Morimatsu, Asami Yokata, and Ms. Sonoda, who have been travelling throughout Europe, telling the stories of how they were affected and how they continue to be affected by the disaster. And I think we all pay huge tribute to their courage in being here and doing all of the work that they continue to do. But before we hear from them, I want to hand the floor to Dr. Ian Fairley to my left, an independent consultant on radioactivity in the environment, a former scientist with DEFRA, which is the UK's Environment Ministry. And he will set the scene and also make some concluding remarks, and very kindly he will take the chair in about 45 minutes when I have to leave as well. So, Ian Fairley, thank you so much.